What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Center Hub Twitter page. I'm here joined by Conrado Pascual, CP3 underscore 777. I'm Wilko Martinez. You might know me as Floor and Ceiling on YouTube or on Substack. But today we're going to be on the TCH Twitter. And Conrad, we're going to be breaking down, I guess, a little bit, first and foremost, just how the draft cycle is shaping up during these first few weeks. And then most of all, we are going to be getting into our top 10 so far. I know that each of us, we all have a big board out. So, Conrad, what's up with you, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm not gonna lie. I'm consuming a lot of basketball. A lot of
Yeah.
basketball. Yeah, I've definitely put a lot more like priority and trying to be a little bit more proactive on being on site for games. So I've had the opportunity to see some games live. On behalf of the Center Hub, right? Going to like St. Mary's, San Francisco. I'm close to a lot of WCC schools. So I'm like, dude, I should make the point. Definitely looking forward to going out to like Cal, Stanford, Santa Clara. So yeah, just trying to get that firsthand intel, boots on the ground.
Yeah, you need to, honestly, at this time of the year. Santa Clara's got a nice team. I would love to be out there. I want to start, I think like early on in this draft cycle, it's very clear that there's a big three that's differentiated themselves from the rest of the pack. Talking about Cam Boozer, of course, AJ DeBonsa, Darren Peterson. Now, you have Cam Boozer at number one. I have him at number three to start the draft cycle. I'm curious, Conrad, what have you made of his start to the season? I think, like the numbers have been tremendous. The stat lines have been great. The advanced stats have probably been even better, actually. But I think that there's been, especially, the first couple of games for me were not all that great or they weren't quite what I expected. What have you made of Boozer so far this early on?
I mean, I guess again, it really depends on both like the initial opinion you had of each of these prospects, and then how you prioritize or how you kind of prefer certain player archetypes, right? So I guess for a guy like me, I really do value like those multifaceted, those toolsy kind of combo forwards, right? Those kind of do it all forwards. You know, I think most people would agree that they would see Cameron Boozer as a power forward. I don't think that's anything controversial. I hear some people say, okay, he could actually kind of play extended minutes on the wing, could be a small ball five.
I don't think he can play the wing.
Okay,
I don't think he can play the wing, but I think he can play the five.
there you go. Okay, see, so then maybe he's more of like a stretch four, stretch five, again, in terms of his perimeter game, stretch four, stretch five, as opposed to like a big wing. All I'm trying to say is, right, of all the NBA draft word or buzzwords, right, like say like 3-level scoring, I do believe he has that in him. I think he has displayed that. I don't know. I feel like a little people are a little sour after like that debut game, you know. But again, I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? How do you view a guy who does other things beyond either scoring or rebounding and everything like that? And I think that's kind of why I've maintained a lot of enthusiasm with him in his case for being number one in this draft class. But I definitely think that, before we hopped on, we said, I think probably Boozer the most, then DeBansa. Boozer has probably generated the most discourse, right, with regards to his standing in the quote unquote the big three. And again, his candidacy for being the number one overall pick, whether that has to do with about his his ability to create advantages, how reproducible some of his go-to scoring moves are, or really, I guess I can't say I'm shocked, but I'm surprised it's become a talking point this quickly. Really, is his physical profile with regards to like his size and his athleticism and how it would relate to playing his projected positions at the NBA level. So I'm still high on him, but I definitely understand that there are probably more questions than there were before the season started. But I think it's good. I think they're healthy questions, right? But yeah, we'll see. But tell me your thoughts then. From why? I mean, obviously you have him third, but again, what is continuing to give you pause with regards to, I guess, your assessment of Cameron Boozer?
Yeah, I think the process worries me a little bit. I don't even know if it's that it worries me because he's been so dominant, throughout his life, throughout his basketball life. And it's not like I would expect that to change necessarily. There isn't a reason as to why it 100% should change. But I think that when I compare him to Debansa and Peterson, just that on ball flexibility to me, the wiggle and just the not just aesthetically either, because I mean, of course, I do think that there is something to that as well. You're saying beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and that's 100% true. I also think that with Cam, like his game just is not as pretty as the other two main guys, so maybe that can sometimes hurt him a little bit just with how he looks on the court. But for me, it's not just how he looks; it's also the advantages and the types of advantages that he creates. I think that on the ball, he's just a lot more limited relatively than Darren and AJ. Like his handle to me, it's tight, and I mean it's functional. It's not like he turns the ball over a lot, but or rather he barely turns the ball over, I should say. But with Darren Peterson, with AJ Debansa, I think that when they're on the ball, maybe they might turn the ball over more, but they're also capable of creating windows and advantages that Boozer might not be able to access, particularly as a ball handler. That to me is what gives me a little bit more pause. But of course, at the same time, I mean, Boozer's game is probably the cleanest of the three. He has very few. I don't know. I don't want to say weaknesses or improvement areas. There's always stuff to improve on. But as of right now, his profile is just very, very clean, right? Like he's a monster on the glass. He's going to make his shots. He's not going to turn the ball over. He's going to get to the free throw line at a really high clip. And then he's going to convert those free throws at a really high clip. All the while on defense, that maybe, and again, these are some of my concerns. I think that he's a little bit limited in terms of rim protection and in terms of also pick and roll coverages, in terms of the windows that he can in turn remove from ball handlers and from bigs. But just the overall steadiness on that end of the floor, I think, is better than Peterson's and AJ's. So I don't know. I mean, I think, a lot of what you said is true, but I'm also still a little bit worried about that on ball scalability and just the process sometimes makes me a little bit uneasy.
I think all that's fair. I guess again, it goes back to one, your projection of him and how you value that projection at the NBA level. So, for example, for me, like, I mean, I don't want to make a lazy comparison. It's just these are just thoughts I've had, and this is what we're doing, right? Just happy hour, right? We're just cracking open a beer and just kind of talking about some of our thoughts about the draft. But for example, like last year, because I've heard both the comparisons and the parallels between Cameron Boozer and Cooper Flag. Just
Yeah.
beyond they're both Duke Blue Devils, right? And again, the reason why I even entertain those comparisons or those conversations is because for me, I see him as not necessarily like a full-time point forward, but he
Hmm.
has that in him. That's how I see him, right? Like he has the ability, he can handle the ball, he can play make, he can serve as the primary facilitator
Yeah.
or the initiator of a play in any given possession. He doesn't necessarily have to do that for all 48 minutes, right? Kind of how I would that's how I see Cooper Flag. That's how I eventually see him, which is why I like what, even though I know it's going to look clunky at first, I think you and I have talked about that, right? Long term, what Flag is going through right now in Dallas will help. It's
Yeah.
kind of how I see, right? How I believe Jason Kidd envisions Flag. That's kind of what I see in Flag. That's kind of what I see in Boozer. I've also made the comparisons. Like I think of Boozer as like a supercharged Scotty Barnes, right?
I think that's a great comparison, and
Yeah,
I really see it around the basket in particular.
exactly. So then that's where I goes. Like it's a guy who maybe doesn't have to have the ball or just doesn't have the ball in his hands like a majority of the time, but he's definitely like a viable primary ball handler, primary initiator, you know, throughout the course of a game. So that's where it goes, right? Like I can understand if you do want like that guy who is an on-ball threat every single possession. I understand then why you would view Debansa and Peterson as more appealing. But I guess that's kind of where it goes. And that's why for me, it's like, okay, this guy can basically assume different roles, right? Depending on what kind of set or different action that the team is looking to run, especially situationally too. I think that's the thing too, right? Is in terms of the scalability is again his adaptability.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm at. Just real quick here, since we're still on the topic of Cam, since we have all these cool bells and whistles. Let's share the screen here. For those who can see or whatever, sharing here the screen
Mhm.
from our friends at CBB Analytics. And I would encourage everyone, if you don't already have an account with CBB Analytics, you should. This is great stuff. It's not just your basic stats, it's great stuff in terms of, again, different shot types for the player, lineup performances, on off splits, all that stuff.
Mhm.
But I mean, over here in advanced offense or offense and defense, I mean, the more the green, the better. This is a lot
Yeah,
of green for
and it's
Cam.
all green.
It's
It's
all green.
literally all
It's
green.
all green. Again, right? The assist rate of 26.7%, putting him in the 98th percentile of all players in Div 1. Again, as you're saying, right? From a guy who's a power forward, a guy you don't really envision as much of a wing.
Mhm.
Like that really speaks to me, right? I mean,
Yeah.
again, just the number of ways you could use him, and again, even if like when he first enters the NBA, he probably won't be the primary or the lead ball handler. So again, right, the types of ways he can generate assists, being like a secondary passer, a connective passer, and then you brought up like not necessarily concerns, but perhaps the limitations of his rim protection.
Mhm.
Again, small sample size, 7% block rate, putting him in the 84th percentile. I don't know how you would view that. For me, again, if he's not a full-time center, it stands to reason that there should be, ideally, a more traditional rim protector behind him, like on the
Yeah.
back line. I think that kind of block rate for, like, say, like a weak side defender, to me, that's acceptable.
It's good. No, to me,
Yeah.
it's good. To me, it's pretty good. I mean, I think like, well, I'll say a few things here because I think a lot of your assessment is spot on. So like with the Scotty Barnes comp, I agree. I was actually thinking about that same comp. Um, I don't know if yesterday or like a couple of days ago, but just like on one of those plays where Cam sort of like bullies his way to the rim and then he this strength and like magnetic hands to collect his own miss and go back up and score. That's something that Scotty I think does a lot. So that's why I was kind of thinking about that comparison as well. And of course, all the ball handling at his size and such as well. But I also think that someone else who he reminds me of is Alperen Şengün from the Rockets. I think like if he was a shooting version of Şengün, and Şengün's been shooting threes now more, but if Boozer immediately is able to shoot threes and he's sort of that same 4/5 who can be a primary ball handler or initiator at times. I do think that's a big win, of course, in the draft. But I think like where some of my concerns could still creep in there is that ultimately, and I do understand that it's a turbocharged version of Scotty or a better version of Şengün as well. But for both of those guys, like I think that we're seeing right now in real time that NBA teams are not building around them as the number one option. Um, Toronto, I think, is still pretty murky, but like I don't think Scotty is the number one guy there in the future, assuming everything goes well. And then with Shangun, it's not like he's the number. I mean, I don't know, but like Kevin Durant is the number one guy, or else they wouldn't have traded for him. I guess is my take on that situation. Um, can Shangun become that number one guy later on in his career? Sure, why not? But for now, and after a few years now in the league, the Rockets are still choosing to go in that direction. So I think like if I'm drafting at number one, I want more security that said player is going to be my number one guy in the future, not just my number one pick, but my number one guy. And I'm still not fully convinced that Boozer will get there as easily as AJ or Darren. I think Boozer can get there. And, I've been seeing some chatter on Twitter or, on whatever platform saying that Cam maybe is only going to be a role player or like a solid player at the next level. I don't agree with that. I think he's going to be an absolute, monster and stud. But I just question like the level of dominance, I guess. Like, is he that 1A for me?
Before we move on, I'm really curious because we actually alluded to it earlier, and you just said, is it within the realm of possibility he could reach that level again to be that, quote unquote dominant 1A? What is it that you believe would be preventing him from reaching that level? And the reason why I ask that is, again, is it the athletic concerns?
Not necessarily the athletic concerns, because I think he's fine athletically. I think he's just fine. I think like maybe his, I guess, first jump isn't that explosive, but every other part of his athletic profile is really good. I mean, he could be longer as well, I guess, but it's just like the on ball advantage creation. I just have questions about how that looks at the NBA level when, as you're saying, if he needs a five to play with him most of the time, then I think that his fit becomes a little bit more contextual, just relatively more contextual, because we are talking about the thinnest of margins here between the top three. I just think that Boozer's situation might end up being a little bit more reliant on context than AJ or Darren, possibly. But again, it's still so early on. And I mean, Boozer has been the main guy in high school, in AAU, at Duke now, it seems. We'll have to see how far this Duke team gets, but he has been the main guy. I'm just not entirely sure how that looks like once, the difference in the NBA play style is also factored in a little bit.
Okay. I mean, again, I think these are all good talking points, and I think it's things that we need to continue monitoring. I wouldn't want to like use a 4-game sample size
Yeah,
to determine his entire fate, but
that's the thing. Yeah, we're still so early on. So, I mean, all of these discussions and conversations, I think, set us up well towards the rest of the cycle. Now, you were saying this before we got on the air, Conrad, but with AJ, with Boozer, with Darren, Peterson hasn't really played all that much. So let's talk AJ DeBansa here. He's my number one prospect headed into the season. Remains my number one prospect right now on my board, even though I haven't officially updated that since before the season started. What have you seen from AJ so far, Conrad? And if you want, we can even start with this last game against UConn, which I think, was a pretty good example of the ups and downs that AJ DeBansa has as a prospect.
I mean, with DeBansa, so for clarity, you and I are flipped, right?
Yeah.
I have Boozer at 1, Peterson 2, DeBansa at 3. You have the other way around. You have DeBansa at 1, Peterson at 2, Boozer at 3. So again, still the same big three, or his top three, but slightly different order. With Debansa, I mean, I've been impressed. Let's put it that way, right? Like he's definitely met expectations, right? And I think a lot of us had like fairly high expectations for him. I would say again, given that he's like what 6'9" ish, 6'10".
Yeah.
What is he listed at? He's listed as 6'9". I mean, I think he's arguably one of like the more fluid or like one of the more fluid ball handling wings. I think there are other wings that are very athletic. You can maybe make an argument they're arguably more athletic than Debansa, but they're not. They don't handle the ball to the extent that AJ does. Again, as we said, at the top of the episode and before we got on air, seems like of the big three, Boozer and Debansa have the most colorful discourse. Let's put it that way, right? I think there's a lot more varying opinions, which is not a bad thing. I don't really see. I've seen like the last couple days some criticism of his handle, saying it's not functional at the NBA level. I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, like,
I don't think that's true. I mean, I don't see how that could be true. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say AJ Debansa has a perfect handle. I mean, he doesn't. But I mean, I don't know. Just reviewing the last few draft cycles off the top of my head, I cannot think of many wing prospects, let alone guard prospects, that I have more confidence in their handle than I do in AJ Debansa's. I think like there are times when smaller defenders can get into his handle because he's so long with his movements and his strides, and he tries to get so low to the ground sometimes that it is easier if you're a smaller defender to kind of pick into his handle like from behind, like from underneath. And that happened. I would have to review the tape maybe once or twice against UConn, but I mean, yeah, I don't have any concerns with his handle. I think like if you watch him attack the rim time and time again, he's using his handle to get to those spots. He's not just, running and jumping. I mean, he's very deliberately, being herky jerky with his handle. He's stopping and then going. He's wrapping, his footwork and his handle around the defenders to get to the rim. So I don't have issues with AJ's handle. I have very little concerns there. If anything, I think like, I've wanted to see more threes this early in the year. I think he's
yeah,
been very like super aggressive or super focused on attacking the rim, but shooting a few more threes would actually help him, open up his path towards the basket. And then, even though I actually think that his defense has been pretty solid, I can understand the criticism if people want, more defense production in terms of numbers.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think you brought up a lot of great points, or I think you really contextualized it really well. I mean, going back to the handle discussion, because that one really threw me off. I'm
Yeah,
like, you looked at that, like you watched that UConn tape, and that was your takeaway.
I
Like,
hadn't seen that one. I hadn't seen that one.
yeah, it came up a couple times, like in the timeline. I'm not saying, well, I mean, we are members of Draft Twitter, so I'm just saying, right? Like, hey, okay, so let's think about it, right?
Yeah,
Um, but I'm with you. Like when I saw him against UConn the other day, as you said, I feel like handle and ball security are not synonymous. And I think the nature of his handle and the way he moves kind of helps improve his ball security. As you said, he's such like a fluid guy. He moves, like kind of like a gazelle,
yeah,
So I think like when he spins, it's not wasted movement, it's in order to create space, right? And to protect the ball, you know, before rising up for like whatever his shot, like his step through or a jump shot. He did that multiple times against UConn. If anything, I think that's impressive. I don't know. But As for the defense, actually, here, let's just pull AJ's up here.
Yeah, go
I
for
mean, it's interesting with the Bansa. So again, here in the right hand box, his advanced defensive metrics, steal rate of 1.5%. That would put him in the 51st percentile. Block rate 1%. So that'd be putting him in the 3rd percentile. Not great. He obviously doesn't have the stocks to show up for it. Now I'm with you. I think some people, like, I'm not saying like everyone, I'm not like making a generalization, but I think like if you didn't watch a lot of DeBance's film yet, again, albeit 4 games or whatever it is,
it. Yeah.
and you're just kind of looking at the box scores or even like here, like CBB analytics, this is not promising, right? Like this is not impressive. You would assume then that he has low activity on the defensive end. But again, you disagree. How would you then explain this? Or, like, yeah, what are your thoughts in terms of like the lack of a gaudy, stock number?
Yeah. No, I mean it's a fair question and a fair concern to have. I think like starting off here, just the baseline really is that AJ headed into his freshman season at BYU. It was not as good as a defender as Cam Boozer, even in high school. I think, Darren Peterson was probably. I don't want to say that Darren Peterson was a much better defender because I actually think Peterson got a tiny bit overrated as a defender towards the end of his high school career, but Peterson was also better. So
Right.
just starting off there, right? Like already coming into the cycle among that big three, to me, he was the one who needed to show the most improvements on D. Now, getting into what he's actually shown this season, I think like off the ball, he's been more aware than I expected him to be. I think he's been pretty good at communicating and switching. I thought in high school, one of the issues that he had again as a defender and again off the ball was that he would ball watch and just kind of fall asleep, maybe give up a cut, give up a rebound. That hasn't shown up as much, I think, at BYU so far. I think that his engagement level has been pretty good. Um, the steals, I think like he's been more focused on discipline really than trying to make plays when it comes to that. And then the blocks, yeah, I would love some more blocks. Don't get me wrong. At the same time, I don't want to discredit what he has shown so far in terms of making plays around the rim or just on ball handlers with his length. I think that he's been pretty impactful, even if the numbers haven't shown up. Of course, like the numbers need to show up a little bit more as the season goes on, but that might also be partially, small sample size here. But yeah, probably just a combination of all those things, right? Like AJ needing the most defensive work headed into the season, then AJ trying hard, to be disciplined on that end of the floor rather than being focused on actually making plays and maybe a little bit of that small sample as well. So far, I haven't been super worried about his defense. I felt fine about it. But yeah, I do want to see a few more, a few more upticks to that percentage point.
So in the same vein, how you said about Cameron Boozer, right? Like if you're taking someone number 1, you want to feel good that they are like, the guy, like
For sure.
your franchise player, your franchise cornerstone, not just like, your number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Kind of likewise to how you just kind of assessed his defense and how perhaps the numbers don't necessarily accurately reflect his, engagement on that end.
Hmm.
Offensively, obviously we've seen how gifted of a scorer he is.
Yeah.
Now, as a playmaker, as a passer, again, the numbers are not particularly impressive, right? 13.1% assist rate, which is not horrible, not great, but for a guy who has, right, like a very high usage, like he touches the ball a lot.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, definitely.
is that something because that's what a lot of people, again, right? We saw that after like what his debut game,
Yeah.
how there was the negative criticism, like it's just a scorer, like it's
I mean, it's something to watch. It's something to watch, and I think like over the last, you know, 2 seasons of his high school basketball, I felt like AJ was really trying to like make improvements with his passing and his playmaking and just his overall processing of the floor. I thought that he had made, some leaps there as he headed to BYU, but this last game against UConn, as I said, was a pretty good example of his ups and downs. I thought, especially in the first half, there were a lot of reads that he missed out to the 3 point line, in which he was, engaging the UConn defense, one, two, three defenders. And of course, that meant that some of his teammates, in turn, were free, but he just didn't find them. So, those are the types of, playmaking looks and advantage creation opportunities that I think he needs to continue leveraging a little bit better. At the same time, though, I do think like some of the passing flashes have been cool. Using his size to see over the top of the defense. I think that he can use his handle, to get to his spot, and then, as I said, engage the defender, suck in an extra guy, and then make a play from there. So I think here, in terms of his passing, what I'm most focused on for the rest of the cycle probably would just be seeing growth, right? Like, I think that there was a time during that UConn game where AJ was using his handle and his flexibility, and that sort of, like sometimes he even moves a little bit like Shea Gilgeous Alexander with how he stops and then goes and just kind of has a
yeah.
funky, like pattern to his motion. But there was a time when he got into the paint and like three UConn defenders converged on him, and he went up in the air. He dropped it off to the BYU big. I forget who was on the court at that time, but he dropped it off to the BYU big, and then he pointed at the big, saying, "Hey, like the wing is wide open for a three." I want to see AJ be the one who makes that pass. I want to see him after he engages those three defenders, and once he's up in the air, instead of dropping it off to the big, just finding the wing shooter himself. If I can see that sort of growth from him throughout the season, and I guess just over the start of his NBA career as well, I would be feeling pretty encouraged by his playmaking. How have you felt about his passing?
I'm not gonna lie. I think it leaves a lot to be desired. I
Okay.
think again, it's such a small sample size, right? You're playing next to like Rob Wright, you're playing next to Richie Saunders,
Yeah.
and they're again very intuitive players, right? They're very cerebral players, not to say mechanical, but cerebral,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you see like the early chemistry between Rob Wright and AJ DeBansa. Like I understand it, right? Like he's easily the most versatile scorer on that team. So
Yeah.
I understand if he's going to be used more as like again, the play finisher. Um so I haven't really seen him like, I think it's kind of lazy when people kind of make the comparisons between him and Ace Bailey because I feel like there were times where Ace just either did not read the defense correctly or he really did just look off, right? His teammates. I don't see AJ doing that. I've yet to see that. And so, again, fellow TCH member, Game Break Now, it's Cody Ramsey, right? Just chiming in saying that BYU's system will do wonders for AJ. I definitely agree.
I
I
think
think he'll
so. Yeah.
probably be a lot more polished of a player uh, for it. But again, we have like his heat map up here, just to kind of further emphasize what you were talking about. I mean, again, it's only what 4 games, but it's taken 10 3-pointers total. So
No, this,
not
this is
great.
a this is a great graph. I mean, this is a great graphic. I think it really shows what AJ has been focused on at the start of the season.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely again the rim pressure again for his rim frequency and again finishing at roughly like just under 70% at the rim. That's something you definitely want to see if you're going to be attacking that much. You'd probably have to pick yeah, probably have to pull up synergy to figure out like how many personal fouls he draws at like the rim. I'm assuming it's fairly decent. I mean, we don't have to do that now. I'm just saying. But again, he hasn't really taken as many mid-range pull-ups. Not a bad thing. It's just his form looks good. I feel like he could do that.
Yeah, I
He did
think
a
he can
little
do
bit.
that.
Yeah, he definitely did it against UConn, right? As they were kind of going into zone at some point throughout the game or at different points. Um, but yeah, it's a really interesting player. I think you and I have talked about this before. We've done like what 2 draft cycles together now. I think.
Yeah,
Um,
something like that.
I'm not a big player comp guy.
Mhm.
That goes for both my NBA and my WNBA draft coverage. Because again, right, like when you compare a player to an established veteran, like we as fans, we already have certain biases towards that player.
Mhm.
So even if you understand like the archetype, the player archetype, or the stylistic comparisons being made, you still have like a bias towards that player. It's like, oh, well, I'm not that high.
Yeah.
But you kind of said like, hey, at times AJ has a little SGA to his game. I think AJ has drawn the widest spectrum of player comps. So I want to hear yours. Who do you think who's your player comp for him?
Um, my player comp for him, damn. I mean, if I had to go with just one guy, I guess
I
like
mean, whoever. If it's a mix, it's fine. I'm just saying it's
if it's a
always interesting.
mix. Well, if it's a, I don't know, because if it's a mix, it's gonna sound like I'm gassing him up way too much. Like if it's a mix, it's just gonna sound crazy. Cause I think I'll go with a comp here, that I think makes sense. But I'll go with Jimmy Butler. Actually, I'll go with Jimmy Butler as a comp.
Okay, I have not heard that one. And
Like
I'm not. I
like
feel like I'm
prime,
on
Jimmy,
draft Twitter quite a bit. So
like NBA, but like I'll preface this by saying like NBA version, like a much bigger, like wingy version of Jimmy Butler almost. I mean, I don't know, just like someone who can handle the ball and really like get to the rim and create, foul shots for himself, can get, hot from mid range, from three. It's hard to say because like Jimmy Butler has had a few iterations of himself just throughout his own career. Like his play style has actually changed quite a bit. But other than that, I mean, there are times where he definitely reminds me of Shea with his movements. I think like a player comp that he got a lot when he was in like ninth and 10th grade, which I actually think, um, or rather, I should say, I'm not quite entirely sure why it got like phased out all the way, but like Giannis as a comp, I think is interesting in a way, just with like how he attacks in transition and like if he continues to fill out, then he'll definitely just be like a four. Um, I don't know. He's a pretty unique player.
do you like? I guess before we move on, because I heard it today, like on ESPN, right? They say it all the time. Do you
Yeah.
like the Tracy McGrady comp?
I don't mind it for his jump shooting. I think like in terms of how he gets into his shot, like later career Tracy McGrady, I see some similarities there for sure. Not younger Tracy McGrady, I don't think. I think that's a different type of player, but maybe more
Yeah,
mature Tracy McGrady. I can see some of the stuff with like how intentional AJ is getting to his shot and like T Mac as well. Like they're not usually like wasting more than two or three dribbles to get into their pull up. So I can kind of see it there. I see some shades of it.
nice, nice. Okay, shall we move
Third,
on to?
Darren Peterson. Not much to talk about here, for me at least, Conrad. How about you?
I mean, like I said, it's interesting. Again, we were talked about this at the top of the episode. Talked about this before we got on air. It seems like Peterson has the least amount of discourse, and that's not a bad thing, right? Um, or I don't know. Does that mean like everyone suffers from groupthink, or it's just that obvious of how his
And he's
how
also
obvious his
not
talent
he's
is.
not playing at all is the thing, which is a little weird. Like, are you starting to get some weird vibes from like how are you feeling about this? Like him not playing at all?
Well, isn't this like yeah, there is like I don't know. Is his injury ambiguous? I mean, like they haven't
Well,
definitively. It went from like what day to day to like now, or I don't
so
know.
I don't want to, I don't want to dabble in misinformation here as other accounts on Twitter might, but let's just see what Bill Self said yesterday or 2 days ago, rather. He goes, the tweet goes from Mike Vernon, Bill Self on Darren Peterson, open quotes. We're not obviously going to have him, at least for the immediate future. I just don't know how long that will be. And that comes, as you said, Conrad, after he appeared to be out day to day with some sort of, what was it, like a hamstring issue, or what was it exactly?
I think so. Yeah.
But the reason why I'm bringing up that it's a little bit odd is because, I mean, number one is that definitely it could just be an injury. If it's an injury, whatever, I hope that he gets back to full health soon. But I've been seeing some Kansas fans on Twitter pretty unhappy about the situation. They've been wondering if something else is going on here. I don't really see why that would be the case, to be honest. But I guess, when a fan base starts kind of talking like that, it's worth paying attention to because sometimes they might be more tapped in um, than us who are looking at it from the outside.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not familiar enough with the situation to say anything definitive, but I have seen a lot of what I think you're referencing. Like, the idea that like he may potentially shut it down for the year, or what I'm saying, or leave the
Yeah,
program. I don't again, I don't know,
which would
but
surprise me. I mean, it would like leaving the program to me. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think that was off like a one of those Scott Hughes CBB fake accounts.
yeah.
But like getting shut down for the year, I mean, maybe, yeah, I guess. Like, I'm looking at a tweet here that says, reasons why Darren Peterson has allegedly missed games as of November 11th. Number one, cramps, then not feeling well, then the hamstring. And then he went from the hamstring being day to day to, being a TBD sort of situation. So, I mean, uh, it's worth, monitoring, I'll say.
I mean, when we're talking about these guys, like it was gonna get to my next point, and I'll save it, like my last question before we exit the big three talk. But I mean, like, I think kind of what we were saying, right? There's a lack of discourse with regards to assessing Darren Peterson's game.
Yeah.
So if he just shut it down for the season, he's still a top 3 pick. Like, I feel of these guys, right? Like, I feel like his standing in this draft class um just is the most solid. Let's put it that way. Even if like I don't think, like, for example, I have him second, not first, I still think he should feel very comfortable. Like, I'm not falling past 3. So I don't know. I really don't know. Because again, it's like, okay, you're injured. But then now, as you were saying, like, just kind of these other factors may or may not be playing into it. I don't know. So again, very small sample size, 2 games. Um, you know, but in those 2 games is interesting. He was pushed. He was challenged by North Carolina. Um, Again, it's not like I'm trying to humble the young man. He's drawn, I think, the most lofty player comps. Which again, hey, like that just speaks to how talented and skilled he is, whether I agree with it or not. But okay, let's put it out there, right? He's received the Jordan comps. He's received the Kobe comps. Basically any Hall of Fame shooting guard I've kind of heard associated with him,
Yeah. Yeah.
in
No,
one form or another.
I've heard that
Um,
too. Wait, Conrad, before we move on to the next guy, though, I am
yeah,
curious to get your input on something about Darren Peterson.
please.
You brought up you brought up how he's been comped to Kobe Bryant, and I mean, whatever, that's fine. But like, I mean, it's fine. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, whatever. Like, this is a terrible comp. I mean, people are free to do it as they wish. But like, to me, the reason why I cannot get to that comp, or even like the Michael, I mean, whatever. Michael Jordan is a bit much. Like,
There's
but for me, Kobe, I think like his game was always predicated on being extremely physical. And yes, of course, there was a lot of finesse as well. But I think that Kobe was always someone who was seeking out that first point of contact. When I watch Darren Peterson, yes, he's got a really strong frame and he can absolutely play with contact. He can play through contact as well. No doubt about that. But most of the time, I think that rather than initiating that contact himself, I actually think that he's looking to kind of like get around defenses or get through defenses, just kind of like slips through defenses, glides through defenses, rather than like punishing them physically.
I love that you said that. And you said the key word that I was going to get to, which was glides. Because truly, if we're really going to make like these historical NBA comps, like, and I say this with absolute respect, I
Yeah.
think Peterson stylistically is more Clyde Drexler than he is Michael Jordan, and then again, that's not a knock. But as you said, glides. I think he's just not just, but he's a very smooth athlete. And as you said, right, he finds ways to like really attack like the gaps or the creases, but not necessarily with just power and explosiveness, right? It's just, again, it's really kind of like smooth movement, and he's just very quick, especially going like laterally. So again, not a bad thing at all. It's just, again, it's a different type of athlete. But it's hard to say, again, to take too much stock into Darren Peterson's season. I mean, he played 2 games, one against like Green Bay and then one against North Carolina.
Yeah.
If anything, defensively is probably where I think he's impressed me the most. And I think we had reason to believe he was a good defensive player, but again, very small sample size, but still nearly a 5% steal rate, 5% block rate. Those types of guards usually have a certain level of success in the NBA. You know what I'm saying? But again, it's hard. I feel like at this point, the other guys, even though it's like 4-game sample sizes, they've had at least, the other players have had like 2 games at least against Power 5 competition.
Yeah.
So,
Just
you
want to see
know,
more. Want to keep seeing more of DP, honestly, because I mean, like the couple games we did get to see, they were pretty exhilarating to watch. So would definitely get to, or would love to get my eyes on a little bit more Darren Peterson.
yeah. Let me ask you then. You have AJ 1,
Yeah,
Aaron Pearson 2. How close
they're
or
very
how
close.
far apart are AJ and Darren?
Yeah, they're very close. They're very, very close. I think like what ultimately set AJ above Darren for me was just that I like the size and the length a little bit more, and then just from the numbers that I have throughout high school, AJ was more efficient than Darren Peterson as a scorer. So yeah, I just ended up going with AJ over Darren, but very close for sure. Very, very
So
close.
then how close or far is the gap between those 2 guys and Boozer?
It's a little bit more distant between those 2 guys and Boozer than it would be like from 1 to 2, but it's not massive. It's not massive. It's not massive at all. Cause like um, when I was working on my preseason board, like I had Boozer at number 2 for a while. So I mean, it's not a huge gap at all.
So again, the question I pose here before we transition to the non-top 3 guys or the non-quote unquote big 3 is, I think there's, and it's kind of funny because we've only had like what, 2 weeks? Yeah, the first
Something
2
like
weeks
that.
of the college basketball season. But I think there are at least some people who feel that it's not necessarily this definitive big 3, you
Yeah.
know, like there is now a tier between them. Like those might still be the top 3 prospects, but they're not like in all 3 of them in a tier of their own. Do you agree, or do you see that happening?
Not right now, but I mean, this next guy that we're gonna talk about, Caleb Wilson, I think he's got a decent chance. I think Ament has well, I don't know about Ament anymore, but I think Caleb Wilson has a chance of cracking that top 3 tier, I should say, not the actual top 3, but like the same tier. Um, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it will stay those top 3, and no one else will crack into that. But maybe Wilson has a chance.
Let's talk about that one.
Let's talk about him. Yeah, let's talk about Caleb Wilson. Let's talk about some of these other guys because I do have just about half an hour before I have to get going to a dinner, but we should have plenty of time before that to get into all of these other guys. Caleb Wilson, yeah, I mean, I think like from the very first moment that he debuted in a UNC shirt, he was super impressive, just dunking galore. His defense has been pretty impressive as well, even though I will say this, I actually think that his defense can only get better because he's an even better defender than what he's been able to show. So I actually think that his offense has been carrying him throughout the start of the draft, conversation, draft cycle, what have you. But once we actually, get further, into the cycle, get into Wilson as an NBA player as well, truly it's the defense, which is just outstanding. And I think that he's going to hang up his hat there in addition to, this scoring development that we're seeing, how assertive and aggressive his being, which all has bodes really well for him. Conrad, what have you made of Caleb Wilson? Because he's also number 4 on your board.
Yeah, he's a physical beast, man. He's a physical specimen, to say the least.
Sure,
And that's the thing, right? I was talking with fellow TCH members, Corbin Ford, Maxwell Geiger, right? Like, if you only watched, if you didn't know anything about these prospects and you just watched like their YouTube highlights from the first 2 weeks of the season, right? It's understandable if you had Caleb Wilson number 1 on your YouTube big board because everything he does pops. It's very emphatic. Now, again, an elite athlete does not necessarily automatically translate to being an elite NBA player. Do you have like those ancillary skills to, justify you being picked not only this high, but being part of a team's kind of like building or rebuilding plans, depending on who's selecting him. But I mean, again, kind of looking here from our friends at CBB Analytics, they played some good teams so far. And again, defensively, he's been a monster. As you said, the guy is just an incredible rebounder, right? Both defensive and offensive rebounder. His motor, right, is at an all-time high. He doesn't stop. I mean, the only thing that's red between both his offensive and defensive advanced analytics or advanced stats is his 3-point rate, which, yeah, as you said, right, he's looking to attack the paint. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I still feel very comfortable or very confident with him being number 4 on my board. It's kind of the same thing. I see him being kind of like a 4, perhaps a small ball 5. Again, small sample size, but so far, like, he's held up really well when he has to kind of like either switch onto the perimeter or kind of switch in the paint. That one game against Kansas where he was basically like defending Flory in the post, that's some impressive stuff. Especially if you think highly of Flory Badunga. So I mean, I'm still high on him. I definitely do think the shooting or the lack of shooting is something that definitely has to has to continue being monitored. That's the thing. I don't know. He's going to be a one and done. So I don't really know to what extent, expanding his range, to what extent it's going to happen here this season at UNC. I think it's going to have to be a gradual process, and it's something that we're going to have to monitor. Yeah, whether it's through his free throw shooting or maybe even just like the mid range. He definitely doesn't lack confidence. And when he faces up, it looks good. So, I mean, yeah, he's still definitely 4 on my board.
The confidence for me, I think that's like what has improved the most throughout the last like 18, 24 months or so. Just being so much more comfortable, like, being willing to experiment out there with the ball in his hands when he was in high school, being
Yeah.
able to like go through that process where he is being used on the ball a lot more. And sometimes he made mistakes, sometimes it went well. But, going through that adjustment curve in high school, especially as a senior, I thought really helped him out in terms of like developing this new aggression that we're seeing on offense. And then, yeah, I'm with you. I think like 3-point shooting, definitely something to watch there. Not sure how much we'll be getting at Carolina. I mean, he has Henry Vasar as well, who can shoot threes, and they're sharing the front court there, so they can kind of like flip flop there. But free throws have been okay so far, I guess. 22 for 32 from the line. I have him here on Sports Reference, so that would be right around 69%. I think that if he can crack the 70s, I'll feel
Yeah.
pretty.
Yeah. And just before we move on, here's a shot chart as to be expected, you know. But here's the thing, as you said, it's an impressive shot chart, right? Rim frequency, rim efficiency. He's shooting 82.6% at the rim.
Mm,
That's it's pretty good,
it's
right?
very good.
I'm glad that you brought up just real quick. I like that you brought up Henry Visar. One, I think he's an absolutely underrated center. You know, we'll get to him probably in another episode, but again, a sneaky second round, pick or sleeper. But
Yeah.
the rapport he has with Visar, not only is it going to help Caleb's individual game, but that's why I don't think he's quote unquote just a dunker. Like the passing he's doing, like when they're interchangeable, like
Mhm.
one, the high low passing, but if, say, for example, if Caleb is at the free throw line or the top of the key, he's definitely making some good backdoor reads. And same thing, if Visar is the high man, Caleb understands like how to where to cut or where to dive or duck in. That's what I'm saying, right? Like to me, that's a guy who definitely can read defenses and process it quickly. So it gives me a lot of optimism of what he's capable of as again he continues to expand his game.
Yeah. Yeah. No disagreements there. Let's move on to our next guy here. Let's talk about not much
Let's
to
go on
really
your board.
go on my board. Okay, let's go on my board. Sure, let's go on my
Yeah.
board. Number 5. I have Nate Ament at number 5. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can just share our thoughts a little bit more rapid fire now since our time is running a little bit short. But I think Nate Ament hasn't shown anything that I wasn't expecting so far. I think his first game was a little bit rough. I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but just going off, what I saw and what I remember, it was a little bit rough. I think, like, for me, my biggest question headed into this season at Tennessee was the strength and the finishing at the rim. That so far has been a little bit of a struggle, and I want to see improvements there, which I was expecting before the season as well. But I thought that maybe with the added strength, it could change early on. So far, it hasn't. I'm looking at his numbers here. I have him 8 for 18 at the rim so far this season, so that's 44% at the rim. And then if we break that down to the half court, it actually drops to 42.9% at the rim. And then he's only made a third of his layups. To be fair, he's only taken 6 layups, but still, missing 4 of those 6 layups probably is not a great indicator there. But yeah, I think like the strength and the finishing has been a little bit of a concern. And then I was wondering how Tennessee would use Nate Ament exactly, because I see him as much more of like a dribble, pass, shoot kind of wing rather than just like a pure scorer. So far, I think it's been okay. Like I think they've let him, touch the ball in different spots and like get some ball handling reps and stuff.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. Little discrepancy according to our friends at CBB Analytics. They have him at 5 of 14 from the rim,
Okay.
um, which would put him at 37.5%. Either way, whether it's 8 or 14, I mean, the lack of attempts alone is
Yeah.
something that again is a little bit. I don't want to say alarming, but it's definitely something that we wanted to monitor coming into the season, and it has not. Right, like he hasn't quelled those concerns. Um, the thing about it too is, again, I'm very impressed with his ability to draw contact and get himself to the free throw line. But again, right, of how many free throws has he taken so far? I'm pretty sure none of them have come on layup attempts. Last time I checked, right? He does
Let
a
me
really
see.
good job of getting guys in the air. That's, I think, one of his coolest trademark moves so far is his ability to hold his follow through on like his jump shot,
Yeah.
and he gets fouled, but he hasn't actually drawn any fouls at the rim. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier about AJ and Caleb Wilson, right? Is again that is real rim pressure, and we know he's not the same kind of physical player that those guys are, but again, that to me, then that's not a 3 level score. Like that really limits, and that's not a bad thing, but that just really changes his outlook. Um, because again, we knew this coming in, right? Both at the
Yeah.
prep and the AAU level, he wasn't particularly efficient at the rim. And now, you're getting thrown into the SEC. I don't know, right?
It's gonna be something to track because yeah, I mean like 3 level scoring, you need to finish at the rim in order to actually be considered that. And so far, like his mid range and his three, I think will be fine. But being unable to finish at the rim or as you're saying, draw free throws and like play through and with contact, um, that's definitely a much bigger concern when you're like 6'9", 6'10", as is the case with Ament.
Yep. Yep. How much more time do you have?
I have, I can probably do like, let me see. I mean, I can probably go like right until eight, or right around eight.
Oh no, I mean, like if you got to go. I'm just saying
No, no, no. Oh,
because
no, no. I don't
I
have to
think
go. No,
let's
no.
yeah, no, that way we can pick like certain prospects.
Is there anyone you
Um,
want to talk about here?
well, here let's our friend Twill here has been very emphatic.
Let's see.
He would like
Michael
us
Brown
to talk
Jr.
about Mikel Brown, and you are relatively higher on him than I
Sure.
am. You have him at 8. I currently have him not that big of a difference. I have him at 11, but I have him in a
Yeah.
different tier. Like he's a tier down from my other guys on, and I'll
Yeah.
show my board. But Mikel Brown's definitely a guy who has, if you weren't already familiar with him, he's quickly turning heads, right? He's putting people on notice. Again, having like a lot of those discussions of him definitely being in the lottery, but like how high in the lottery, right? Like, is he one of those guys to be a candidate outside of the big three? Um, what are your thoughts on Mikel Brown? Because I know some of our peers
Sure.
like are interested, but that level of interest does still vary, even after like this hot start he's had.
Yeah. I think like you know the reason why. Let me actually before we even get into this, I know there's a lot of Louisville fans on Twitter, so let me make sure that they know that we're about to break down a little Michael Brown Jr. here. But I think like the reason why I had Brown at number 8 on my sorry, at number 7 or at number 8 on my board, sorry, to start the
Very good.
cycle was because I think that he can be an offensive engine point guard. And what I mean by that is someone who racks up a bunch of time on the ball, who can facilitate for others, but who can also get a bucket for himself. I think that's what you need in today's NBA if you're a guard, if you're a point guard. Now, with Michael Brown, my main concern going into this year, by far, and maybe like it might have been the most pronounced concern of any prospect like in my lottery range. It was his finishing at the rim and his strength. His strength there, I should say. Like, his strength overall still needs, to be addressed, I think. But his body has been filling out decently. So no real, massive concerns there. But I was very worried about how that lack of strength showed up in relation to his lack of finishing at the basket. So far, what we've seen this season has been great. I mean, like, I'm looking at his numbers here on Synergy. They have him at 12 for 16 shots at the rim. He has 3 dunks right now, 4 dunk attempts, 3 dunks made, which as a point guard, I think is, fine, especially when you're someone more like Michael Brown Jr., who, his game starts first and foremost with his ball handling and his 3-point shooting, and then he uses that to create looks for himself at the basket and at the rim. So, so far, I think like he's been able to address my main question that I had about him headed into this season. And if he's able to continue finishing at a high clip, I don't really have any, huge concerns about him as a 3-point shooter. I think that he can shoot on the ball. I think that he can shoot off the ball. Um, I think that he's able to scale down, next to a bigger playmaker or a different guard if that needs to happen. So I don't have too many concerns about that. But I was worried about how his strength and his finishing would affect his advantage creation as a point guard. So far, it hasn't hindered him. I will add that, like, the competition level hasn't been super high. Like, Kentucky was a great test for him in that regard. But other than that, he played South Carolina State, Jackson State, Ohio, which are, fine. They're decent schools. They're okay schools, but not really the caliber of test that you want to evaluate a potential NBA franchise or lead ball handler up against. But yeah, I've liked him so far. Where do you stand on him?
I mean, I feel like I don't know. People think I'm like being a hater or something like that. Like I feel comfortable with where I have him, right? Which is, I mean, like again, right? I have him 11th, and every player within a tier, it's very fluid, right? So again, my tier goes from like 10 to 20. So if you put him at 10, then like it won't take much convincing for me. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
But as you said, definitely a strength, the ability to, again, for a guy who is, I think his production, his ability to be effective is again dependent on him being on ball quite a large majority of the time. And if you're going to be on ball that much, you have to be somewhat of a factor at the rim. Again, like here, our friends at CBB Analytics, I mean, they have his listed height is 6'5". I don't believe that. I'm sorry. Again, if you're calling me a hater, I don't believe that. I think he's closer to 6'3" than 6'5". We can split the difference and say 6'4". But I mean, obviously right now he's a thin guy, but that's fine, right? I mean, you're a prospect. You're not a finished product. As you said, the early going, he's actually finishing 81% at the rim. So that's cool. We'll see. Again, like I don't expect it to stay like, at that level of efficiency. But as ACC play begins, you'll kind of get a better idea of, the ways in which he can find ways to, not only get to the rim, but either finish or draw contact. Obviously, we know if you're drafting him, you're drafting him to be a point guard. You're drafting him to be your team's, again, primary playmaker. At the very least, when he's on the court, perhaps when he starts out his career, he has, someone to play behind, before he gets starter minutes. But do you think he shows, or two questions?
Mm.
Do you believe his NBA like success, in order for him to fully translate to the NBA, he needs to be more of a factor off the ball? And if so, how would you assess currently his play off the ball?
Um, it's okay. I mean, like as a spot up or catch and shoot guy, I think it's fine. I think that like number one, what I look for there is that like is he willing to play that role? Like, because there's a lot of guys who can make spot ups, but like when the opportunity actually comes for them to take a spot up, they don't do it. I think like that was one of people's biggest gripes with James Harden for years, or like with Luka Doncic for years, was that like, hey, you don't take any catch and shoots, even though you can make threes. Um, I think Michael Brown can do that. He can take threes and make them off the ball. But I'm curious. I don't know. Like he doesn't add much value off the ball. Outside of that, I think like he can probably make a quick decision if he I don't know, draws a rushed closeout or whatever, like he'll be able to attack the defense or move the ball, I guess. But like, yeah, I'm with you though. I think like he's gonna be on the ball most of the time. Like, and I would expect like whichever NBA team that drafts him to want to use him in that respect. So it's like, yeah, I don't know, like I'll expand the question here, Conrad, just because like I've gone on this tangent now. But like this is actually one of my concerns with Bennett Sturts is that can he play off the ball as well, or can he only be like a slow paced, super heavy on ball guard, even though he's great at what he does? Like, is that gonna carry up to the NBA? So I don't know. It's an interesting time to be a point guard,
Oh, so we're talking about Sturts now?
or both, honestly, Sturts and
I
Brown.
mean, yeah, in terms of being a factor off the ball, because again, right, like, I mean, no player really dominates the ball, right? I mean, like, even like again, like SGA, that's what makes the best teams, right? Is that
Mhm.
everybody is a factor to be like the best teams, right? Like say like whatever, OKC or Denver, you have multiple players who are capable of, making a play off the ball, or at least making a good read with the ball in their hands. So uh it's not like, yeah, it's not like these guys have to necessarily, pound the rock all 48 minutes or whatever, But with Mikal Brown, like, I don't know. Like, I just I'm gonna leave it as it's TBD with how effective he can be when the ball isn't in his hands. Because we've seen this with a lot of other point guards, right? Where when they don't have it, they're a complete non-factor. I'm not ready to say that like that's how I feel about Mikal Brown, but hasn't been much of a factor in like say screening. Doesn't really
Yeah.
cut much. When the ball leaves, he'll relocate to get the ball back, but not really to like like there hasn't been as much urgency to kind of like relocate for a shot. You know, um, those are the things I'd like to see with Sturts. I do feel a little bit more comfortable. I think we kind of talked about that in like the TCH mock draft. I
Yeah.
did. I drafted him, or I selected Sturts for Toronto because I feel like he can be a factor off the ball, say playing off of a guy like Scotty Barnes or whatever, Brandon Ingram if he's still there. Um, no, I mean obviously, like again, their strengths both come in what they can do with the ball in their hands, their ability to make those quick reads. I don't know. I do have Sturts just right ahead of Mikal Brown in my personal big board simply for that reason, right? Like I think that like Sturts is in no way more athletic than Mikal Brown, and that's not a knock on Sturts. I don't think he's a particularly more dynamic
No,
athlete.
no,
Yeah, but I
definitely
think
not.
he's a lot more decisive, and maybe that comes with
Yeah.
age, right? Like he is explosive off the catch in the sense that he kind of already knows what he wants to do, not like premeditated, but like okay, he sees like an opening, he sees a crease, he's going, right? And he'll do whatever that results in. Layup, pull up, you know.
And he
That's
can
kind of what
dunk too as well. Like Sturts can dunk, which I think a lot of people forget, like don't mention this about him, but he can get up for a dunk.
So let me ask you then, since we're on the okay, so Mikel Brown, what then do you think is just right now? Right
Yeah.
now, you have him at 8. Just right now, what do you think is his highest range? Like he can be as high as
Like
for you. Yeah.
okay. Because I think like for the NBA, he could be as high as 4. But for me, I mean, look, I mean, I'm not going to, like discount any possibilities here. I mean, sure, he could probably get up to 4 for me as well, actually.
Okay. Okay.
He
Then
could
what
probably
about
get there. But I'll add though, I will add like maybe like number 6, like 6 is a more realistic like high end outcome for me.
Sturts? Because I have seen him as high as like outside the top 3.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen that too. So I have Sturts at 13 right now. Um, for a while in my preseason rankings, he was in my top 10. So like he is within that range for me, and like looking at my tiers right now, he's in the same tier that goes up until 7th. Um, damn. Damn. I'll probably say like 6 or 7, like 6 or 7 would probably like as of now be where I'm most comfortable like predicting where Sturts in a high end outcome could end up for me. But as I said though, like I really don't want to count out any possibilities here. Like maybe he's just an absolute monster as the year goes on. And I guess he could get up to number 4 as well, but that seems unlikely. I'll say like 7th for me, probably.
Yeah, no, I'm just, again, it's not like to put any of us, either of us on the spot. I just feel like, again, you're starting to see how, I mean, it's more interesting when I think when people's boards are like start to differentiate. But given that we're still relatively early in the draft cycle, I do think it's, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like anyone who has Sturts or Mikel Brown that high are wrong to feel that way. I like, I like that different, that different perspective. And I kind of want to understand where, that's coming from. But I know you got to head out soon. This has been a
But
fun
hold
first
up, Conrad.
episode. I know, I know.
Before I do head out though, before I head out, I'll take the chance to put you on the spot here to end the stream. I'll be putting you on the spot, sir.
Crap.
Um, and you can turn around the question on me too. Um, right now, to close things off here for the night, if you had to give me, 1, 2, 3 guys maybe who you think could crack that lottery or top 10 range for you, who you
Yeah.
didn't have in that range for your first board, who might they be for you?
Okay. 2 off the dome are really easy for me. And again, like it's fine, right? Like we don't have to be, we've been doing this long enough, right? What's the way to approach these things, right? It's not about, being first, right?
Mm.
You want to be as right as possible. So, I mean, again, just for convenience, for my first big board that I posted on Twitter or X, whatever, I only posted top 30 because it was just convenient. I think you did too.
Yeah,
But we have our boards past top 30. Like, I think mine's around top 60. I don't know how deep you went so far, but
I have it,
Kingston,
yeah, like 30 right now, 30, 35.
yeah, Kingston Flemings was literally 31st, right? So he didn't make the initial graphic, and I think you and I kind of talked about this with Kingston Flemings. It was a lot of things. It's like if you went off of the theoretical potential from what we knew at the time during the preseason, he could easily be, in top 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think you and I had discussed, like, we didn't know if the playing time would come where he could really justify, right? Where it's less theoretical. Well, look at that. Coach Sampson felt differently. The playing time has absolutely come. He's gone off to a hot start. A lot of the optimism, not just in our projections, but again, kind of the assessment of his prep career, they're kind of still manifesting, right? It's definitely at the very least translatable to the NCAA level. They played against some pretty high level competition already. So yeah, Kingston Flemings is one, because again, for all those things that we said about, Mikel Brown and Sturts and everything, the ability to play on or off the ball, frankly, defensively, I think he's a completely different level of defender than those other guys. Very tenacious rebounder. I think it's a very underrated aspect for guards, especially point guards. So he's definitely one who probably in the next board I'll have. And another guy, he was on my first board, but he was like, I think 30th. That was Nicolas Abdelas. Just again,
Sure.
I don't. He was like a first rounder for me last year, and I don't know. I guess I just kind of had him a little bit lower. Yeah, like had him in 30th, simply because again, I wanted to still see same thing. To what extent could he leverage, his size, his length, or is it going to be more of like a stationary guy? Because again, he is a pretty proficient shooter. I just did not expect him to have the ball in his hands this much, this early. So, I mean, again, if assuming this is sustainable, probably he's another guy who's gonna crack the lottery. I could probably pick a
Yeah.
third, but right now those are the two I feel most comfortable saying I'll probably have him in that lotto range.
Yeah, those are two good names. I'll add because I have them too. I mean, I think those are like the strongest candidates for me too. I'll add a couple guys here just to cap things off on this stream, who I think stand a chance of cracking the lottery. The first one is Cam Carr from Baylor. I think that if he starts showing a little bit more on defense, and there we go. If Cam Carr starts showing off a tiny bit more on defense, I think, and if he can like just pass the ball to any extent, honestly, because like he's just been focused on getting buckets right now. But I think that if he can like show that he's able to leverage that crazy 7'2" wingspan into being, a more productive defender, that would do him really well and propel him up to that lottery range. And then the second guy that I think is back with a chance, rather, this isn't some sleeper or anything like that, but Chris Sanak Jr. from Houston as well. Kingston Flemings has been great, but Sanak hasn't been as good, I'll say. But what has impressed me is his ability to play in a more narrow role. And if he's able to do that for the rest of the year, be a little bit more efficient as well, turn the ball over less, which was already the case headed into the season. But if he can do that and just kind of keep building on what he's shown this early on in the cycle, I think he could probably maybe crack that, lottery or top 15-ish range.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, we'll probably resume this on our next happy hour. But Senak is definitely a guy I need to see. I mean, we need to see a bigger sample size for everyone, but for me personally, he's one I definitely need to see a lot more. I love that, their performance last game. I thought he was fantastic. Probably again, like the most, how do I want to say this? Like proactive game I've seen from him.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this before in the TCH mock draft, just real quick, like, does he have the requisite skills? Does he, and again, I'm not trying to like say like he's a low IQ player, right? Like you could definitely understand the game, but your ability to process and react, I've always felt like he's just a step slow in kind of either reading the defense or kind of understanding like, okay, I see a set defense. Where should I be on the court? You know? So basically, I think that's kind of the differentiator um, between being a power forward or maybe just like a center, kind of
Yeah.
like a speed five. So that's definitely something I'd like to continue seeing from him in these next couple games.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us for today, but we hope you enjoyed this very first edition of the TCH Draft Happy Hour. We're definitely going to be looking to do more of these in the future. So, for me, for Conrad, please make sure to follow the Center Hub on socials. I mean, if you're watching this stream on Twitter, I'm guessing that you have our Twitter handle, but just in case, it's at the Center Hub _BB. You can follow Conrad at CP3 _777. You have his username there as well. And then over to the side, you have my beautiful username as well at Wilko MCV. But again, priority here, Center Hub. Make sure to follow the Center Hub. If you're not following the Center Hub, you should probably reevaluate your draft content choices. No, just kidding. But you should follow us for sure.
Kidding, not kidding. All right. Take care, everyone.